Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends of the forests in the Barents region, welcome to this second session of the Barents Forest Forum 2021. My name is Anna Delphine, and I am the chair of the working group on the Barents Forest sector, and I will be the moderator of this second day of the Barents Forest Forum. Before we begin, I would like to repeat some of the practical information from yesterday. The webinar is translated into Russian and English. In order to receive the translation, you will have to use the Zoom client, and at the bottom row, you will find a globe symbol where you can choose between English and Russian. You are welcome to ask questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to be able to provide you with an answer either during the webinar or after. This webinar will also be recorded and made available afterwards. Yesterday, we focused on the forest's role in the circular bioeconomy and the opportunities that forests provide for a sustainable future. I think we had many good presentations and interesting conversation at the end of the session with some young people about the challenges to involve young people into our sector. Today, we would like to focus on the most pressing challenge facing the most important terrestrial ecosystem in the world, as well as in the Barents region, the forests. The relation between climate change and forest disturbances is an unavoidable topic. We are days ahead of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Climate Convention, and it's urgent to act. It is a clear relation between yesterday's topic on transition to a circular bioeconomy and the topic of today. Forests may provide services that can both mitigate climate change and contribute to economic and social development. However, if you are not able to adapt to the rapid changes in climate, the basis for this dual win evaporates. It is our sincere conviction that adaptation and mitigation to climate change will be a prime topic for international cooperation in the years to come. Today's session is a modest contribution to this. Now, we have to make a small change in, okay, sorry for that. To kick off today's program, we are pleased to have among us Ambassador at Large Michael Mann, EU Special Envoy for the Arctic. We strongly felt the need for linking our topic to the very forceful policy developments in Europe and to invite a person outside the core forest community to reflect on some of the challenges and opportunities on natural resources and developments in the region. Michael Mann, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I do apologize for keeping you waiting until the very last second. I had a few technical problems this morning. Despite having done these things for about the last 18 months, I don't seem to be able to get it right all the time. So I apologize for being a little late. But anyway, thanks very much indeed for asking me to speak this morning at this excellent event. For us, the Barents region brings to our mind the spectacular Arctic nature, the resilient people who inhabit the area, and their cultures which are strongly intertwined with the harsh environment. The Barents region is the borderland of 4 countries, 2 of which are members of the European Union. It's the home of more than 5 million people, many of whom see themselves as members of indigenous peoples. Historically speaking, state borders were not a strong concept in the High North, and today the complicated challenges that we face know no borders. The European Union engages in the region through the Barents Euro-Arctic Council as part of our efforts to reinforce multilateral engagement on the regional level. We do this in line with our updated Arctic policy in order to contribute to maintaining peaceful and constructive dialogue, to address the challenges arising as a consequence of climate change, and to support the robust, inclusive, and sustainable development of the Arctic regions. we clearly have a lot of work ahead of us. All the Arctic regions share a number of common features, such as low population density, low accessibility, low economic diversity, abundant natural resources, and of course, the high impact of climate change. And the most dramatic challenges that we face arise from climate change. Due to so-called polar amplification, the average temperature of the Arctic region is already 2.5 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial temperatures. This trend will continue. Thawing permafrost will cause a serious challenge for infrastructure, and it has the potential to release billions of tons of CO2 equivalents. Everybody will benefit if we are able to find common solutions for these shared challenges. For the EU, it's important that various policies, such as our Arctic cooperation, our Barents Euro-Arctic cooperation, and the Northern Dimension policy complement and support each other. They are part of a continuum which extends into the circumpolar and the Baltic Sea regions. Now, as you probably know, this is a significant moment for the EU's involvement in Arctic matters, and thus for our future role also in the Barents region. Last week, on the 13th of October, the High Representative and the Commission adopted our new Arctic policy, a stronger EU engagement for a sustainable, peaceful, and prosperous Arctic. The new policy is the result of 18 months of consultation, outreach, and discussions within the EU institutions and with governments, regional and local authorities, stakeholders, NGOs, academics, and indigenous groups. And we think that we have come up with a bold and exhaustive document that can be the blueprint for our engagement in Arctic regions for many years to come. Naturally enough, running right through our policy are the themes which will be discussed here today: climate change, natural resources, and socioeconomic development. We all know that the Arctic is changing rapidly under the impact of global warming, growing competition for resources, and geopolitical rivalries. If we don't manage those changes carefully, they will irreparably damage some of the most beautiful and fragile places on Earth and threaten the livelihoods of the millions who live there. We've set out precisely why and how we intend to step up European engagement for the Arctic. And the three dimensions along which we want to act are climate action, international cooperation, and putting people first. Climate change is the most acute threat the Arctic is facing. No other place in the world is warming faster. The Arctic sea ice is melting, the Greenland ice sheet is melting, and permafrost is thawing. At the local and regional level, we see coastal erosion, biodiversity loss, and the destruction of associated ecosystems and ways of life as a result of this. The consequences of those changes profoundly affect nature and people in multiple ways, including through rising sea levels or completely derailed weather systems. And in the end, everything is connected. The climate crisis, the collapse of our ecosystems and biodiversity, our security, our health and safety, and our prosperity and that of future generations. The 20s of this millennium will be remembered as the make or break decade in the fight against the climate and biodiversity crises. Of course, the 8 Arctic states have primary responsibility for what happens on their territory, but many issues affecting the Arctic can only be addressed through regional or multilateral cooperation. Many of those issues are relevant for climate change, for preservation of biodiversity, and for socioeconomic developments. Our new policy highlights the need to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss, both internationally through the UN processes, but also locally in Arctic regions. Probably our most headline-grabbing proposal was our push to keep oil, coal, and gas in the ground, including in Arctic regions, building on existing partial moratoriums on hydrocarbon exploration in the Arctic. Now, this has not gone down well everywhere, but we hope there is an acceptance that we need to speed up the transition to a carbon-neutral future, both for the fragile Arctic ecosystems and for the entire world. It is our belief that a serious debate needs to begin, and soon. By promoting sustainable solutions in the European Arctic, we want to lead by example and inspire other Arctic regions and other parts of the world with harsh climatic conditions. Our new Arctic policy will aim to stimulate an innovative green transition where the Arctic regions can showcase future compatible job creation in innovative sectors. We're thinking here of carbon neutral energy, hydrogen, sustainable extractive industries, e-based learning and health, connectivity and infrastructure, sustainable tourism, green technologies, and of course, fisheries and agriculture. In 2021 to 27, the EU's cohesion programs will focus on the green and digital transition, providing support for smart economic transformation, funding for entrepreneurs, and also initiatives for young people in the Arctic. EU cohesion policy programs, in particular what we call the Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme, provide support for Sami and Inuit culture, livelihoods and entrepreneurship. The Northern Finnish and Swedish regions are eligible for the new Just Transition Fund, which aims to alleviate the social and economic costs resulting from the transition to a climate neutral economy. The Invest EU programme will mobilise billions of euros of public-private investments and is also applicable in the Arctic. And the EU's Climate Action Innovation Fund supports demonstration projects of low carbon technologies in the marine environment. We will support the designation of marine protected areas in the Arctic Ocean, in line with our EU-wide target of 30% MPAs by 2030, as well as the international 30 by 30 campaign. We will continue to negotiate for a strong agreement on biological diversity areas beyond national jurisdictions, and keep on contributing to the implementation of the agreement to prevent unregulated high seas fisheries in the Central Arctic Ocean. We will aim to increase our strategic autonomy in some of the minerals which will be crucial if the transition towards a carbon neutral economy is to be a success. At the same time, we will advocate with our global partners to set the highest standards for reducing the environmental impact of processes for exploitation and processing of raw materials. To achieve our objectives, the EU needs to intensify its cooperation on Arctic issues with all concerned, and notably with allies and partners such as the US, Canada, Norway, and Iceland. And in a similar vein to Norway's recent Arctic policy, we also aim to put people first. By focusing on the people, we mean to find a balance between preserving precious ecosystems and encouraging sustainable economic development for the benefit of future generations. One cannot exist without the other. The EU will continue investing in the future of people living in the Arctic, paying special attention to the interests and views of young people, women, and indigenous peoples. In the EU, we say that to succeed with the green transformation with our European Green Deal, we must leave no one behind. This also applies to the sustainable development of the Arctic. That's why we say putting people first. Now I'd like to say a few words specifically on forests. Our new Arctic policy does not specifically mention forestry policy, but this does not mean that it is not in our thoughts, only that the EU's recent forestry policy is not Arctic specific. We all know the importance that forests will play in climate action over the coming decades. And with this in mind, the EU recently adopted its new Forestry Strategy for 2030. This is one of the flagship initiatives of the European Green Deal and builds on the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. It will contribute to achieving the EU's biodiversity objectives, as well as greenhouse gas emission reduction targets of 55% by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2050. It recognizes the central and multifunctional role of forests and the contribution of foresters and the entire forest-based value chain for achieving a sustainable and climate neutral economy by 2050 and preserving lively and prosperous rural areas. It aims to improve the quantity and quality of EU forests and strengthen their protection, restoration, and resilience. To adapt Europe's forests to the new conditions, weather extremes, and high uncertainty brought about by climate change. This is a precondition for forests to continue delivering their socioeconomic functions and to ensure vibrant rural areas with thriving populations. The strategy will support the socioeconomic functions of forests for thriving rural areas and boost forest-based bioeconomy within sustainability boundaries. It will also protect, restore, and enlarge the EU's forests to combat climate change, reverse biodiversity loss, and ensure resilient and multifunctional forest ecosystems by promoting the sustainable forest bioeconomy for long-lived wood products, developing skills and empowering people for a sustainable forest-based bioeconomy, protecting the EU's last remaining primary and old growth forests, ensuring forest restoration and reinforce sustainable forest management for climate adaptation and forest resilience, and also and afforestation of biodiverse forests, including by planting 3 billion additional trees by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, the Barents region and the broader circumpolar Arctic face huge challenges from climate change and its negative effects on natural resources and biodiversity. Overcoming these challenges and adapting to the new situation will require close international cooperation in a number of settings. As I hope I've been able to illustrate this morning, the EU is willing and able to play its part in that. We now have a roadmap for our future work in the Arctic, and now the difficult work begins on implementing it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Michael Mann, for providing us with insights on the considerations of the EU on these important topics, and especially on the recent strategies on the Arctic and on forestry. So thank you very much. We have had a very good cooperation with Russia during the Norwegian chairmanship of the working group of the Barents Forest sector. We also know that the topic of today is of great utmost importance to them. This is logic, given the importance the Russian forests has for the nation, for the region, and for the globe. I'm happy to welcome Mr. Vladimir Dmitriev, head of the Department of Science and International Cooperation in the Federal Forestry Agency of the Russian Federation, to share your views on climate change and forests with us. The floor is yours, Mr. Dmitriev.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Хочу поблагодарить вас за такое большое внимание к этой проблеме, то, что вы собрались и приняли участие в нашем совместном мероприятии. Конечно, безусловно, я хочу поддержать предыдущих докладчиков и отметить то, что глобальные изменения климата являются одной из таких существенных проблем современности. Достаточно много внимания и уделяется и политике, и наша общественность, и средства массовой информации. Ну и, конечно, надо отметить, что глобальные изменения климата в арктической зоне, в зоне нашего региона, Баренц региона, происходит значительно более активно, значительно более существенно, нежели чем в других природных и климатических условиях. За последние 100 лет средняя температура в Арктике увеличивается в 2 раза быстрее средней температуры на планете, и средняя температура к 2080 году, если мы не сможем достигнуть цели Парижского соглашения, не допустить увеличения средней температуры на Земле на 2 градуса, то увеличится в арктической зоне в 2–2,5 раза больше, нежели чем везде. Ну и, конечно, мы не можем не отметить то, что, к сожалению, по данным Всемирной метеорологической организации, последнее десятилетие стало жарким десятилетием за весь период метеонаблюдений, которые проходят на Земле. То есть это больше, чем за 100–120 лет. Следующий слайд провернуть. Можно перевернуть следующий слайд? Не увидим, нет. Да. Значит, аномалия среднегодовой температуры воздуха в северном полушарии показывает, что постепенно идет увеличение аномальной температуры. За последние столетия наблюдается статистически значимый положительный линейный тренд среднегодовых температур, как раз на широте, на 70–85 широтах. И как бы наиболее активно этот тренд увеличивается за последние 30 лет, начиная с 90-х годов и до нашего времени. Ну и как бы средний рост температуры за последние 30 лет превысил 2,5 градуса. Следующий слайд. Значит, общее... Следующий слайд можно перевернуть? Так, отлично. Значит, ну, средняя общая площадь управляемых лесных экосистем Российской Федерации, тех субъектов, которые входят в регион СБЕР, составляет 65 миллионов гектар. То есть это довольно значительная площадь, и поглощение углерода практически во всех регионах имеет положительный характер благодаря тем лесным ресурсам, благодаря тем лесным запасам, которые есть в этих лесных регионах. И мы надеемся, что это как бы мы сможем сохранить эти богатства и в дальнейшем. Ну, следует отметить наиболее активно регионы, которые поглощают углерод. Это Республика Коми, Архангельская область, ну и также практически везде этот баланс является, еще раз хочу повторить, положительным. Дальше. Следующий слайд. Ну и для сохранения наших лесов, сохранения стабильной ситуации вокруг лесных экосистем у нас довольно принята достаточно такая серьезная политика лесная и климатическая, которая определяет во многом те меры, которые позволяют, с одной стороны, охранять эти леса, с другой стороны, рационально их использовать, ну и с третьей стороны, как бы обеспечить систему мер, которые позволят обеспечить и в дальнейшем сохранение и увеличение поглощения этими лесами углекислого газа. Ну, в первую очередь, надо отметить несколько стратегических документов, которые определяют наши как бы перспективы в отношении накопления углерода лесами, которые определены стратегией развития лесного хозяйства. Затем у нас есть как бы также ряд политических документов, которые определяют и лесную политику, которые во многом затрагивают вещи, связанные с управлением лесами и сохранением поглощающей способности лесов. Также нельзя не отметить поручения президента и как бы те президентские акты, которые направлены на указ президента на достижение национальных целей в области сокращения выбросов парниковых газов. При этом там есть специально отдельные так называемые оговорки, которые говорится, что поглощающее увеличение сокращения выбросов парниковых газов промышленностью и в целом хозяйством Российской Федерации должны во многом как бы зависеть от увеличения поглощающей способности наших лесов, вернее, учитывать поглощающую способность лесов. Ну и также у нас есть ряд документов, которые определяют стратегию низкоуглеродного развития, которая сейчас пересматривается и которая сейчас в настоящее время будет также нацелена во многом на увеличение, на принятие системы мер, которые будут предполагать увеличение поглощения лесами углерода. И как бы, это меры касаются и охраны лесов, и воспроизводства лесов, и борьбу с такими как бы серьезными опасностями, которые связаны с лесными пожарами. Но следует отметить, что только в этом году у нас принято решение президентом увеличить в несколько раз выделение средств на борьбу с пожарами на ближайшие 3 года, то есть выделено дополнительно 8 миллиардов рублей в год на усиление профилактики и охраны лесов. Также у нас реализация идет национального проекта сохранения лесов, в рамках которого предполагается обеспечить полное восстановление лесных экосистем, обеспечить полный положительный баланс между выбытием и восстановлением этих лесов. Ну и безусловно, у нас большое значение уделяется научному, так называемому, обеспечению климатической составляющей, а именно принято, вернее, сейчас идет, есть поручение президента о подготовке федеральной научно-технической программы, которая будет направлена на решение экологических задач и увеличение, так скажем, получение новых знаний о поглощении углерода природными экосистемами, ну, в том числе и лесными экосистемами. Следующий слайд. Следующий слайд можно? Очень большое значение уделяется вопросам адаптации в документах стратегического планирования. Здесь, с одной стороны, у нас есть вопросы так называемых рисков, с которыми мы как бы имеем дело. Это прежде всего это гибель лесов в результате различных аномальных явлений по условиям, аномальным условиям погоды. Это гибель лесов в результате лесных пожаров и в результате вредителей и болезней. Ну, как бы с этой целью, для того, чтобы меры адаптации были наиболее адресными и наиболее эффективными, у нас принято ряд нормативных актов, которые определяют, которые включены в документы стратегического планирования субъектов, и в каждом субъекте, в каждом регионе есть такой документ, который называется лесной план субъекта, который составляется на 10 лет, и в котором есть специальные разделы, которые направлены на адаптацию лесов и как бы предполагают систему мер, которые предполагают адаптировать леса к климатическим изменениям. Ну и каждый субъект самостоятельно определяет те мероприятия, которые как бы должны снизить перечисленные риски и увеличить как бы, адаптивную способность этих экосистем к возможным негативным влияниям климатических изменений. Ну и, безусловно, прежде всего, это охрана лесов от пожаров, это вредители, это экстремальные явления и аномальные явления погоды. Но, конечно, есть один из таких моментов, которые касаются смены лесной растительности, изменения породного и видового состава лесов. И отчасти мы как бы порой сталкиваемся с моментами, которые связаны с уменьшением или сокращением продуктивности лесных экосистем. Дальше. Следующий слайд можно? Ну, собственно говоря, на этом слайде представлены данные, каким образом регионы и как они как бы классифицируют свои риски и как они реагируют на изменение этих рисков, каким образом они как бы пытаются сократить и в зависимости от частоты этих рисков и их реакции на их снижение. Значит, здесь показан процентный состав вернее, тех мероприятий, которые предпринимаются, которые предусмотрены и запланированы в региональных планах по адаптации к изменениям. Вот. И практически все регионы запланировали, стоит отметить, такие как бы профилактические мероприятия, как рост вспышек массового размножения вредных организмов, также риск риск возникновения лесных пожаров. И как бы отчасти многие из них запланировали, что возможно какие-то другие изменения, которые у них возможно быть в результате их природных и климатических особенностей. Ну, значит, собственно говоря, я считаю, что это достаточно большой шаг, который был сделан нашими регионами, и хотели бы в дальнейшем развивать эту историю, эту тему и дальше, и будем информировать, будем обмениваться опытом со всеми другими странами региона СБЕР в отношении нашего опыта и в отношении тех результатов, которые будут получены в ходе тех региональных практик. На этом большое спасибо. Благодарю за внимание. Если есть какие-то вопросы, то готов ответить.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for providing us with a very interesting overview of the forest-related climate policies and the climate risks and the measures that you are planning to implement in the Russian parts of the Barents region. So thank you very much, Mr. Dmitriev. Threats on forests takes different forms. We are happy to welcome Paul Krokene from the Norwegian Institute of Bioeconomy Research to share his insights on important natural disturbances that can affect forests and possible mitigation actions. Please, Paul Krokene.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will talk about natural disturbance factors, and I will focus on insect pests, and particularly bark beetles, since they're a major disturbance factor, a major tree killer in at least in Europe, maybe not in the high north yet, but it's a major threat to conifer forests. So I'll just go ahead. I hope I hope I share the right screen and that this works. Okay, so I will briefly describe what natural disturbances are. And as I said, of the different kinds of natural disturbances, I will focus on insect outbreaks. And the last couple of slides, I will talk about some possible mitigation actions with a strong focus on prevention of insect pest problems, because they're, like many things in life, they're really hard to cure, but it's a better it's more productive to try to prevent them from happening in the first place. So natural disturbances, that's simply any abrupt or gradual change to an ecosystem that will at least temporarily change the ecosystem, for instance, by killing a lot of trees in a forest. So here are some examples, well-known natural disturbance factors in forests. They can be abiotic, that is caused by like physical factors like well, fire. We see repeatedly huge forest fires in the boreal zone. Wind storms or wind fellings, like this picture on the right there from Sweden after the storm Gudrun, which blew down well, millions and millions of trees over a huge area of southern Sweden. And you can also have different biotic or biological disturbance factors. And one is insects. This picture shows a bark beetle attack in the US, where the whole hillside is covered by, all the trees more or less have been killed by the beetles. So it's obviously a huge disturbance to the forest ecosystem. At least it's like resetting the succession to zero again. And yeah, and pests and diseases are the main biotic disturbance factors. Yeah, so the problem or potential problem with these disturbance factors is, of course, that they affect the ecosystem services that the forests provide. So all the goods that society gets out of functioning ecosystems will maybe threatened. Maybe not all, but obviously when the forest burns, there will be no extractable wood, and there will be the climate mitigation effect of functioning forests will be instead of having the forest as a carbon sink, it's a huge source due to the fire. And also with insects and windstorms, as the dead trees, the felled trees, as they start to be decomposed, there's a huge CO2 emission. So these natural disturbances, they threaten ecosystem services. And in turn, the disturbances are affected by climate change, obviously, drought, wind. If you get wilder weather with climate change, more strong winds, more soggy winter soils, you have more storm fellings. And drier weather, of course, will promote forest fires. And in addition, you have forest management. So it's not only about climate change, but it's also about forest management. In Europe, Norway spruce has been promoted by the forest industry, and it's been planted over huge areas where it's not outside its natural range. And it's also been, I mean, many of the spruce forests have very high productivity and very high densities. So so there are effectively monocultures of dense forest spread over large areas, and that, as we will see in a minute, might be a problem. Yeah, I think as the previous speaker mentioned, climate change is much more dramatic in the Arctic than anywhere else on the planet. I borrowed this this figure from the latest IPCC report, again showing that at the simulated 2% or sorry 2 degrees warming at the global level, you have parts of the globe over the oceans here in light color with very little increase or no increase, but then at the top of the globe in the Arctic, and actually particularly in the Barents region, you have like a big pocket of extreme warming up to maybe 6 or 7 degrees. So so scenarios saying that we will have like a 2-degree global warming might translate into a 6 or 7 degree Arctic warming. And this is the increases here are relative to an old historic level, 1850 to 1900. So we're already, of course, higher than that baseline now. So we're on our way, but it could get much worse. And since climate change is not something that is going to happen in the future, but it's already here, we see increasing forest damages in Europe due to all these major disturbance factors. So this this slide that I borrowed from a colleague, Rupert Seidel, and his coworker Thom, it shows increasing forest damages since for decade by decade since 1971, and then it extends into modeled future. The paper was 2014, so even the 2011, 2020 decade is based on model data, and also the 2021 to 2030. So these are projections. But for the past, we see like a strong increase in forest fire. We see a strong, on the right, a strong increase in windstorms, fell the volume, and it's the y-axis is million cubic meters, so it's pretty massive. But then for insect outbreaks, the increase is really, really steep. And for the whole 50-year period, it's a 600% increase. So a 6-fold increase in insect outbreaks. And just a little comment is that these projections have, I think we can conclude that they turned out to be too optimistic, because the last 5 years we've seen unprecedented outbreaks of the spruce bark beetle. So this is per year, but well, 18 million cubic meter per year in this decade. Only 2 years ago, we saw more than 100 million cubic meters killed by one pest alone. So these damages, they are increasing. And I remember I read in a Norwegian newspaper a forester saying that this was a climate change disaster. Well, this has been looked into, and the relative contribution of climate change to these different disturbance factors is shown here. So it's just a relative contribution. So it only makes sense maybe when you compare it to forest, I mean, the contribution of forest management. So, or forest change, as it says here. So we see for insects, the contribution of management is the same as the contribution of climate change. So it's not just about the warming weather, it's also about forestry promoting dense and vulnerable conifer monocultures. And the major forest disturbance agent in Europe is this little insect here. Here it looks big, but it's really 4 to 5 millimeters long. It's the European or Eurasian spruce bark beetle. It's definitely the worst bark beetle problem in Europe. It kills millions of trees, as I mentioned. Sorry, let's see. Just in the year 2019, I think was maybe hopefully a peak of the last epidemic. It killed more than 100 million cubic meters of spruce. So this is pretty massive. It's more than 10 times the annual harvest in Norway. So these recent outbreaks of the spruce bark beetle, they're historically unprecedented. And it's nicely shown in this graph, showing from 1945 million cubic meters of spruce killed by the beetle. And then this graph was only updated up to 2017. So I'll just, I mean, the curve is actually going something like this, up through the roof. And if I had another screen on top of this, it would have been towards the upper part of that screen. So it's been a completely unprecedented extent of the recent outbreaks. And this bark beetle outbreaks, they of course have negative effects on ecosystem services. This is just a review paper a few years back showing the different main categories of ecosystem services that are affected. And there's some positive effect here on the regulating ecosystem services, and that's because there's lots of insects and fungi and other organisms that like dead wood. So when the beetles kills millions of trees, you get a lot of dead wood, and that it will be good for biodiversity at least in the medium long run. But of course, it's not good for timber production. It's not good for carbon sequestration, and it's mostly, these outbreaks are mostly very negative. And what we see, it's very clear, a very clear effect of climate change on insect pests is that they move northwards. So this is an example from North America, where the mountain pine beetle, another bark beetle, it because of warmer winters and special weather, it moved up in from the west side of the Rocky Mountains in Canada. It moved higher up and higher north, and it was able to it blew over with strong winds over the Rocky Mountains, over in Alberta on the eastern side, where it might over the next 100 years spread further in this green. This is a different pine host, and nobody knows exactly what will happen, but it will probably not be anything good for the pine forests in Canada. And we see the same in this is an example from Norway with the spruce bark beetle. This is it's the proportion of years where the beetles can produce 2 generations per summer. In Norway, it usually produces 1, but an effect of climate change will be that it produces another generation. And this is a latitude, so the beetle is not at the very high latitudes yet. But with this is the historical temperatures data, but if you add the future scenarios, towards the end of this century, we will see 2 generations much much more commonly and at much higher latitudes than we see today. So this is more or less automatic, that insects respond very strongly to temperature, and as temperature increases, they will move up in the mountains and further north. And up in the mountains, we've seen some pretty devastating attacks by the mountain pine beetle high up in the white bark pine forest of the Rocky Mountains. This is from Yellowstone National Park, where these high altitude pine trees, they hardly ever experience attacks by the beetles. But as the temperature warms, the beetles have expanded up in the higher forest and killing these keystone pine trees. And the sad thing for this ecosystem is that it's not a very robust ecosystem. So a bark beetle outbreak, it starts in the small with a beetle entering a host, and then you have aggregation, and then you have mass attacks, and then you have stand scale eruptions, and you can have landscape or national level eruptions. But in the end, I mean, like a worst case scenario, you can get all the way to the regime shift, which means that this white bark pine forest is replaced by a different ecosystem that provides different ecosystem services. So you go from a forest to something that is not the forest, or a very different forest. So in a recent review paper on the spruce bark beetle, we looked at the prospects for Norway spruce in Europe, and of course, the prospects are pretty grim in Central Europe and much better in the further north. But red and orange on these maps show the likelihood that a spruce stand will be killed by beetles before it reaches 100 years of age. And historically, this in spruce growing areas of Central Europe, there's small areas with a high or very high risk. But if you increase the temperatures by 4 degrees, most of Germany and most of Central Europe, France, all of this area will be at a high or very high risk. And even further north, well, not quite the Arctic, but southern Sweden and southern Norway, the risk will be higher. And this translates into a huge area or a huge spruce biomass at risk. So hundreds of millions of cubic meters of spruce that will be at risk in Europe, well, due to this bark beetle outbreaks. Okay, so mitigation. Maybe I'll have to speed up, but since we can't really do much about climate change in the very short run, I mean, we can do something to keep it from getting worse, but even if we stopped all emissions today, the temperature would still warm for the next 50 years or so. So what we're left with is forest management. So to do something with our forest, the species composition, the age, that we let them grow before we cut them, and the standing volume per hectare and things like that. So as I said in the start, it's all about prevention, really. Once an outbreak is underway, it's too late. I think then you're already failed in a way. The experience from recent outbreaks in Canada and elsewhere is that it's more or less impossible to stop a huge outbreak. It's a bit like the huge forest fires. They burn for weeks and then they just run out of control. So and stressed forests have a higher risk of outbreak. So this is a favorite model with bark beetle people, but the blue part is where you want to be. So when you have a very favorable environment to the right here, and you don't have too many beetles down here, you're in the blue zone, the non-outbreak zone. So there, if you have a forest ecosystem that's healthy and in this place, it's good. That's where you want to be. But if you have a forest that is stressed by climate change, it doesn't take much to push the ecosystem over in the red zone, in the outbreak zone. And that's not, so that this is not where we want to be. We want to have this forests as healthy as possible. So it's all about, well, preparedness, prevention, recovery, response, of course, but then it's very difficult. So it's cheaper and easier to prevent than to respond. And in the long term, I think what we need to do is to build more robust production forests. So the natural disturbances will not go away, and most of them will be promoted by climate change. So we need to plan and manage forests that are able to withstand these disturbances or recover more quickly from them. And the last point is when you look at forest production models, they tend to say that this is in green, the effect of climate change. You will have a nice increase in forest productivity with climate change. But this is really, none of these models, as far as I know, take into account forest disturbances. So a thing like bark beetle outbreaks that everybody knows will be promoted by climate change is not taken into account because it's complicated. So they produce forest productivity models that look much brighter than they probably are if you're able to factor in pests and diseases. Okay, so I'll think my time is out, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul Krokene, for a little bit worrying but very interesting presentation. We will have a short break now, and we'll be back on the screen at 11:15 Oslo time. I'd like to remind our participants that it's possible to ask questions to the presenters in the Q&A box if you have any, and we will try to provide you with an answer from the presentations during or after the webinar. But now we get a small break and see you 11:15. Thank you.
Hello, Juho, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me as well?
I can hear you and see you, so we should be ready for your presentation.
Excellent. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a little rest from your screens and that you are ready for some more input on today's topics. During the ordinary work of the working group on the Barents Forest sector, we became informed about a project on forest fires in Fennoscandia under changing climate. Juha Aalto from the Finnish Meteorological Institute visited us in our group to inform us on the results of this project, and which is also published in a comprehensive report published at the website of the Institute. We are happy to welcome him to share his knowledge and experiences from this project also in this forum. So please, Juha Aalto, very welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, I will just first share my screen. I assume you can see it, and then like this. Okay, I think we're good to go. So, hi, my name is Juha Aalto, and I said I'm from the Finnish Meteorological Institute, where I work as a tenure track professor in Weather and Climate Change Impact Research Unit. And I will now give very brief kind of summary of the already ended project forest fires in Fennoscandia under changing climate and forest cover. So thanks for having me here. So first of all, very general information about the project. So the project was funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and we had many partners involved in the project. So we had Natural Resource Institute Finland on board. We also had Häme University of Applied Sciences, and also Lapland University of Applied Sciences, and then also Emergency Services Academy Finland in the project. And the idea of this very general project was to kind of synthesize the current knowledge of the occurrence monitoring, modeling, and extinction of forest fires. And then we also looked at the forest fires as a source of black carbon in the high latitude areas. And the main outputs of this project was very comprehensive report, and then also an international webinar that was held at the end of the project. And also I must mention that the kind of this international mobility was in very high role in this project, but then due to the well-known reasons, this part of the project was a bit lacking, but I think we came out quite nicely. And if you're interested already to take a more look at the project, so here's the web pages of the project. So please have a look. Okay, so here in general, as a kind of outline of my talk, I will kind of follow the structure of the report itself and things that includes there. So first of all, I will talk about very briefly about factors affecting the occurrence of forest fires. Then I will move on to recent fire history of Fennoscandia. Then some words about impacts of climate change on fire risk, and then mitigating damages by forest fires. Then I will focus on forest fires as a source of black carbon, and then finally some recommendations that can be made based on the project and the report. And I will use kind of as a basis are very nice infographics that were produced during the project. So these will kind of provide the basis for this presentation. Okay, so first of all, the first part of the report kind of elaborates the factors driving occurrence and a characteristic of forest fires. So fairly general things. So in Fennoscandia, most forest fires are caused by human activities, and lightning causes circa 10% of fires, although the portion of burnt areas and larger fires caused by lightnings are notably higher. Here, by human activities, I mean careless handling of fires and ignitions related to forest harvesting, and especially mechanical site preparation, which is often carried out after clear failings. So in Fennoscandia, the climate is characterized by large variability, and this is also then reflected in the fire weather as well, and then also in forest fire risk. So during wet summers, there are practically no high fire risk days, but when during years of high fire risk, dry conditions can last several weeks, and thus there could be kind of good or high probability for fires to ignite and spread. And then, of course, in addition to climate and weather and fuels, of course, in the forest characteristic and vegetation in general influence fire ignition intensity and spread. So for example, Norway's spruce in forest, they do not ignite as easily compared to dry Scots pine dominated forest. But then on the other hand, more flammable pine forest often results in low intensity surface fires, which are then easier to control and suppress. In the project and in the report, we focused on recent fire history of Fennoscandia, and like I said, we synthesized much of the available data from Finland, Sweden, and also from the Republic of Karelia. Unfortunately, we were not able to obtain Norwegian data within the framework of the project, so this would have been quite nice addition also to the project. But based on the data, what we can kind of conclude is that, first of all, during the past circa 150 years, the amount of annually burned forest has decreased dramatically in Fennoscandia, and this can largely be explained by the societal change that has taken place, and basically means that forest have become a valuable source of raw material. So forest management has improved a lot. So total area burned has remained low, mostly due to effective fire prevention, improved fire observation and fire suppression, and also intensive forest management. During these recent decades, the burnt areas in Fennoscandia forest has been fairly stable, and except for some large fires in Sweden in 2014 and 18. And in Finland, burned areas have remained at lower level compared to Sweden and Karelia. If we then look at the annual number of fires, there's really not that clear trends visible. There's some exception on the recent fires in Sweden, but not that clear trends. And of course, when these statistics have been compiled, they are coming from various different sources, and there could be some challenges how to directly compare these data sources. So it's quite challenging. Here are examples of the long-term fire statistics collected from Finland. So this is kind of the full time series all the way from 1855 to almost present day, showing on the left the annual burnt areas, and then on the right is the annual number of forest fires. So in the left, we can see very clearly how the annual burnt areas has dropped dramatically, and since somewhere from after Second World War, then the annual burnt areas have remained very, very low levels after that. But then on the right, when we look at the number of annual number of forest fires, we can kind of see some kind of variability or even trend towards the present day. But here I really must say that because the data, they're coming from different sources, and there are plenty of different kind of estimation methods involved in producing these kind of time series, it's very difficult to say whether there's actual trend in the data or whether these are simply artifacts that are coming from the estimation methods. So, for example, we can see here that there are some interpolated data at the beginning of the time series. Some of the data are coming from the state authorities. Some are going from forest organizations. Then at some point it switched to rescue services, and the most recent recent years, the data are coming from the Pronto database, which is the national accent database maintained by Emergency Service Academy in Finland. And if we, for example, just look at the last decades here, although the level seems higher compared to other years, there isn't that clear trend in the number of forest fire, at least in Finland. Then we also looked at how climate change is affecting to the forest fire risk. And of course, as in other regions in northern high latitudes, also in Fennoscandia area, the climate is expected to warm at a faster rate compared to global average. And then this warming will then affect, for example, evapotranspiration, which in turn decrease soil moisture contents and fuel moisture and so on. But then there's also great uncertainties related, for example, increase in precipitation, and which could then kind of offset these changes in evapotranspiration and so on. So what we did, we used several different land surface models coupled with climate models to look at how climate change could impact on first of all fire risk, and then fire frequency, burnt areas, and then carbon emissions. And this is, I must say, this is a very crude summary of the main results. In the report, there are actually quite more detailed kind of breakdown of the results. This is just this is very basic visualization of these things. And the arrows now depict kind of the direction of the trend, kind of average it over the land surface models and climate models, just to kind of point out where the trend is going. And we also then split the whole area into northern Finland sector and southern Finland and central Sweden and also Karelia. And what we can immediately see that most of the arrows are red and pointing upwards, so that, for example, fire risk is increasing throughout the study area. Also, fire frequency is increasing, although it seems that in Republic of Karelia there could be decreasing trend due to the decreasing population density. And then burnt area, there's quite robust signal that it's going to increase, and then also carbon emissions are going to increase. But for the area for the Republic of Karelia, there's some uncertainty in the direction of those trends. So of course, any changes in human activities, population density, forest management, and like I said, in precipitation will cause uncertainty in these assessments. We then also considered the mitigation to forest fires in very general sense, covering different topics of monitoring of fires, including flight surveillance, remote sensing, different kind of risk indices, fire spread modeling, and so on. So just to highlight some things, for example, flight surveillance has a really important role in Finland in observing fires and detecting them, especially in sparsely populated areas. Also, of course, a different kind of satellite instrument can be used to detect heat signals of possible forest fires, but based on our report and results in it, those data need really careful kind of filtering, and the accuracy of those data sources is not very good yet. Then we also kind of conducted this questionnaire of nearly 500 respondents covering rescue services and actors in Finnish forest sector, and some topics that kind of arise from those responses were that in order to kind of increase our mitigation and adaptation potential, we need to focus on cooperation at different levels. We should focus on enhanced tracking of fires. We should have very agile response equipment in order to suppress the fires. We should kind of promote community education, and also we need to pay a close attention to sparsely populated areas as well. Some examples of the results, but since I think I'm soon running out of time, I'm not going to go very much into these details. Just as a highlight, we have this kind of claim that the risk of forest fires in Finland increases if we switch from clear cutting to continuous cover forestry, and you can see the response by forest sector in this dark blue color, and then the answers by the rescue service sector in the orange color, and you can see that there's quite large kind of dispersed in the responses. So there's very strong disagreement and also strong agreement to this statement, and it varies quite much depending on the kind of sector that it's response coming from. And this is also available, this part of this questionnaire, but unfortunately it's at the moment it's only in Finnish, so it's a bit difficult in that sense. Very briefly, we also looked at black carbon issues as well. So black carbon is results of incomplete combustion of different carbon-containing substances. And black carbon warms climate by absorbing radiation and in the atmosphere, and also decreasing the reflectivity of snow and ice surfaces. And in the future, projected increase in number of forest fires is also likely to lead to larger black carbon emissions. And of course, anthropogenic causes such as flaring, they contribute to black carbon emissions throughout the year. So we ran some simulation based on modest fire data and IC for Fires model system to kind of see what was the effect of the large fires in Fennoskandia in 2018, and what we kind of conclude that it mainly has very kind of local effect. It kind of increases the concentrations, of course, in the atmosphere, but compared to kind of this global background, those concentrations are actually quite small. But you can see, you can take a look at the results a bit more detailed from the report. Then finally, some recommendations that can be made based on the report and the project. So first of all, regarding fire statistics, so we should aim to harmonize fire statistics and analyze the drivers and variability of forest fire regimes over Fennoskandia. About future fire risk assessments, so we should address the range in uncertainty in future projection of forest fire risk and other variables. And of course, we should implement the latest knowledge of project changes in the mitigation and adaptation actions of various sectors. We should aim to develop technology such as fire spread models, different artificial intelligence applications, and UAV systems to be utilized in forest fire detection and firefighting. Related to operational firefighting, we should aim to sustain dense station network and evaluate general preparedness and efficiency of firefighting. And of course, we should acknowledge the role of preventative measures in tackling forest fires. We should aim to increase the understanding of the climate impacts of black carbon and mitigate, of course, the emissions as efficiently as possible. And then finally, we should develop multi-sectoral national and international collaboration on forest fire issues. So, thank you. That was it. Thanks. And here's the link of it already went, but there was the link to the report.
Thank you very much again, Juha Aalto, for sharing some of the insights from your project with us. And for highlighting this very important topic of forest fires. During the last 2 years of the working group of the Barents sector, we have developed 2 reports. The first on forests and the circular bioeconomy was part of yesterday's program. The second covered UNESCO biosphere reserves within the Barents region and the possibilities for cooperation. Christina Nilsson will share with us some experiences on platforms for collaborating at local and regional level on adaptation to climate change. So please, Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Dear colleagues, I will share with you some results from a pilot study, platforms for collaboration at local and regional level. And I will present first sort of a background, how this idea came up, a list of things that was important. As you all know, the working group Barents Forest Sector works with sustainable management and utilization of forest resources. In the Norwegian chairmanship, we know the focus is on bioeconomic solutions. And as we discussed today, the climate change and adaptations to that. And there is also a search for new platforms for cooperation on the regional level. And in this context, the question came up, could biosphere reserves be involved and be partners and become such a platform for cooperation? And therefore, a pilot study started during the autumn last year. The aim of this study was to analyze the possibilities to establish collaboration between biosphere reserves within the Barents region. Would it be possible to strengthen the regional cooperation with this? And could the geographic areas biosphere reserves be used as platforms for implementing the BEAC working group's activities, strengthen the cooperation between different working groups, and also highlight forest and forestry in the natural resource sector? I will describe for you a little about what biosphere reserves are, and then present a few of the results from this study. You now see a map over the Barents region, and with 6 stars, you also see the 6 different biosphere reserves. There are 6 formally recognized areas. We have Vindelälven Jutadakka in Sweden, North Karelia in Finland, and Laplanski, Kenoserski, Vodloserski, and Metsola in Russia. As you can see, there is currently no biosphere reserve in northern part of Norway, but we went forward anyway because we thought that if we get a positive response on this pilot study, it will be possible to find and to work with other partners in Norway as well as in the other countries. What are they then, these biosphere reserves? It's geographic areas, a network within the Man and Biosphere program, which was launched by the UN agency UNESCO in the early 1970s. And the vision with this network is to make people conscious of their common future and to act together to build a future and to build thriving societies. They are, you could say, learning places for sustainable development. And this is a big network of geographic areas. There are more than 700 biosphere reserves in 129 countries. And some of them are transboundary, and this network is all over the world. And this schematic picture shows how they are built in general. There is a core area in the center of the biosphere reserve, and that is often a national park or a natural nature reserve, a protected zone that contributes to conservation of landscapes, species, and genetic variation. Around this core, you have a buffer zone, which can be used for activities. You can test different kind of management and try sound ecological practices. And further out from this core area, you have a transition area where the local community lives. You have villages, you have factories and companies and all other sorts of human activities. And this is a map that examples this. This is the area biosphere reserve where I live myself. You can see a little dot in the middle of the picture here, Sorsele. That's where I'm sitting right now. And the darker blue zone here is the core area. And you have a lighter blue buffer zone and even more lighter blue transition area. And this biosphere reserve goes all the way from the sea in the east up to the border towards Norway in the west. These areas have the ambition to be model areas for sustainable development, and they want to engage local, regional, national, and international cooperation. And they do cooperate and exchange both with each other in this Barents region and also with other biosphere reserves around the globe. And all these 6 reserves we have studied, they also are also engaged in other international cross-border cooperation. What about similarities? Well, all of these are designed to promote sustainable development. They are devoted to coordination of activities and they work with different actors. They are all gifted with an Arctic climate, but I don't know if I really like the word gifted. Today we have a very heavy snowfall here in northern Sweden, but it's a fact. There are national resources, a unique natural environment, and a rich cultural heritage. There are also problems in these areas. They are all facing the problems of an ongoing climate change. We can see it in flooding more often, and we can see it with the problems that the reindeer herding companies are facing with shorter winters and more problems with ice on the lakes that is not secure like they used to be. They are also struggling with challenges such as remoteness, long distances, and a sparse population. We see that the young people, the youth, they are traveling south to get education, and unfortunately they don't often come back when they are finished with the education. There are some differences, and I've tried to illustrate them with this picture. You have the reserves on the left, you have the total area in hectares, you have the core area in percentage of the total area, then number of employees and ownership to the right. And they are all quite big. Vindelälven Jutadaka is the largest one, and Kenoserski is the smallest. There is a difference when it comes to the core area. In Sweden and Finland, the core area is quite small compared to the total area, whereas in Russia, it's quite big. Laplansky have a core area that is 84% of the total area. There's also a difference in employees, number of employees. In Finland and Sweden, it's a very small administration, just around 3 people working with this, whereas in Russia, they have a lot more employed people. And this is also reflected in that the administration in Finland and Sweden, they do not constitute an authority, and they don't have mandate to decide on protected areas, on regulations and restrictions of any kind. They don't exercise a controlling function. In Russia, the administrations are the same as for national parks, and they are federal state financed establishment, and they have the formal mandates and responsibilities to exercise authority. In Russia, most of the land in the biosphere reserve is state owned, whereas in Finland and Sweden we have a lot of private landowners together with state and forest companies. What are the common interests then? They all work with sustainable tourism in many ways, including management for a growing number of visitors. The climate change issue is also a common interest, together with youth exchange and cooperation, and an effort to use more digital tools and social media to reach the young. Environmental issues like protection, preservation, education, monitoring is essential, and together with research in many ways. Multiple use of forests, including not only the wood, but other things as well, such as berries, meat and fish, and mushrooms. And of course, exchange and cooperation between indigenous people, including a developed cooperation between reindeer herding and farming. I will not say so much about the Barents cooperation. This is also described in the pilot study, but I think that you know a lot about this already. But two things I want to highlight, because it aligns with the priorities for the biosphere reserves studied in this document. Cross-border people-to-people cooperation is a foundation, and this is the same as for the biosphere reserves. And also this overall objective about sustainable development, that is also similar. And here I have listed the priorities that and focus areas activities in the biosphere reserves that also align with priorities of the Norwegian BEAC chairmanship, the Swedish County of Västerbotten's BRC chairmanship, and the Barents program. There are many things that is the same. You see here again this youth exchange and cooperation topics, activities and projects around climate change, sustainable development, research and education, and about cultural creativity and innovation. So the conclusion from this pilot study is that biosphere reserves can without any doubt be an important partner and a potential platform for development in the Barents cooperation. These geographic areas can be used for testing different kind of forest management or other things. So what's next then? Is this another document that is presented and we just put it aside? No, we hope that the discussion goes on, and it does. The discussions have continued. The regional forest programs in County of Västerbotten and in North Karelia, together with the biosphere reserves North Karelia and Vindelälven, they are currently discussing future collaboration, and with the ambition to continue a collaboration at local and regional level on the adaptation to climate change. And of course, as I already mentioned, to engage more partners in the Barents region. And here you have links to a bit more reading about biosphere reserves, but also a link to the pilot study. Please read it, the pilot study. I've only very shortly now mentioned some of the results, but in the study you can find much more information about these biosphere reserves and a lot of inspiration about projects and activities and best practices that might inspire you to do something on your own or together with others. So with that, I say thank you.
Thank you very much for these insights, Christina. We appreciate that the effort in the working group of the Barents Forest sector has pointed at some ways for cooperation that also other parts of the Barents cooperation can benefit from. And we look forward to the following up of this work. Now, let us again turn to Russia. A project cooperation between Finland and Russia is exploring ways and means for active forests to adapt to climate change. We will now hear from Alexei Pekoyev, head of Laboratory of Boreal Forest Growth Dynamics, Forest Institute in the Karelian Center of the Russian Academy on these findings. Mr. Alexei Pekoyev, the floor is yours.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники лесного форума Барents региона. Вначале хотелось бы поблагодарить организаторов за возможность выступить с данным докладом в мероприятии и в целом за прекрасно организованную площадку форума. Цель моего доклада – сделать попытку ответить на вопрос, насколько интенсивное лесное хозяйство может помочь адаптироваться к изменению климата в России. Я выступаю от имени коллектива авторов. Вот фамилии авторов представлены на слайде. Коллектив авторов – сотрудники Института леса Карельского научного центра Российской академии наук. Мониторинг климатической ситуации ведут сейчас многие страны. По данным центра Хедли, метеослужбы Соединенного Королевства, Великобритании, глобальная температура на планете за последние 45 лет, с 1976 года по 2020, выросла на 0,8 градуса Цельсия. По оценке Росгидромета в России, скорость потепления в среднем по нашей стране значительно превосходит среднюю по земному шару и составляет для того же периода 2,2%. Причем тенденция к потеплению наблюдается в северных регионах страны в зимнее и весеннее время. Красные области на карте отчетливо об этом свидетельствуют. И так, чему же нас может научить анализ прошлого? Как известно, наука, она имеет прогностическую функцию, то есть анализируя прошлое, можно сделать своеобразный прогноз на будущее. Вот, например, одно из исследований, которое проводилось в Карелии, Еленой и Юруковской в 2009 году, продемонстрировали, что на основании данных анализа пыльцевых зерен, которые были получены при исследовании палеорастительности и палеоклимата, эти данные показали, что наиболее вероятной естественной реакцией лесов региона на потепление будет увеличение площади лиственных лесов. В данном исследовании исследовались, как я уже сказал, пальцевые зерна древесных растений, которые были получены в образцах при исследовании палеорастительности. И, например, один из результатов данного исследования было то, что 6000 лет назад в Карелии были довольно распространены лиственные породы, то есть в тот период был климат теплее, чем сейчас. В лесах, например, в Карелии, помимо березы и осины, были такие породы, которые не свойственны для нашего региона сейчас. Это, например, лещина, королюс, или вяз, ульмус. Сейчас, на данный момент, леса лиственные в Карелии занимают 12% площади региона. При этом увеличение их площади, наблюдаемое в последние десятилетия, идет не по причине потепления климата, а в силу антропогенных причин. Это сплошных рубок, пренебрежение лесовосстановлением и последующими уходами за формирующимися молодняками. Температура и влага являются доминирующими факторами роста растений, поэтому потепление климата с большой долей вероятности будет способствовать повышению и производительности лесов. Разумное ведение хозяйства, основанное на знаниях закономерности, динамики и продуктивности лесов, позволит не только получать экономическую выгоду, но и за счет регулирования породного состава, ускоренного роста деревьев, увеличивать поглощение углекислого газа и, что самое важное, его депонирование в изделиях из древесины на десятки и сотни лет. Тем самым роль таежных лесов в регуляции климата, она довольно-таки существенна. В прошлом году группа специалистов с участием и соавторов данного доклада в рамках проекта «Руфуклум» были представлены результаты моделирования сценариев лесопользования в Карелии. Было рассмотрено 4 таких сценария лесопользования. Это традиционная модель, то есть, которая сейчас применяется в России. Ну, считается, что это модели все-таки экстенсивного лесопользования. Это вот как раз сценарий БАО. Также рассматривался сценарий интенсивной модели, то есть с применением большого довольно-таки объема рубок ухода, то есть уходу за молодняками, и также при создании молодых насаждений с применением селекционно улучшенного посадочного материала. Следующий сценарий, третий, это CSF2. Она ориентирована на сохранение старовозрастных лесов. И четвертый сценарий, который рассматривался в данном исследовании, это CSF3, на сохранение лесов северной бореальной зоны и более активном использовании лесов средней бореальной зоны Карелии. Так вот, какие же были получены результаты данного исследования? Согласно прогнозам, леса Карелии будут обеспечивать депонирование углерода в течение всего периода по 2 из этих сценариев. Это CSF1 и CSF3. В то время как сценарий БАО и CSF2, они превратятся, то есть леса превратятся в источник углерода примерно к 2060 году. Также было получено тот результат, что увеличение доли рубок ухода, который при интенсивной модели лесного хозяйства может достигать 50% в общем объеме заготовки древесины, и применение улучшенного селекционного материала как раз в сценариях, которые вот здесь показаны на 2 нижних линиях CSF1 и CSF3, они поддерживают состояние лесного покрова и стимулируют годовой прирост древесины, достаточный для компенсации увеличившейся потребности древесины, которая вот сейчас наблюдается во всем мире. Однако России для того, чтобы перейти вот к этим 2 сценариям лесопользования, еще необходимо время, чтобы перестроиться с традиционной модели лесопользования на модель интенсивного лесного хозяйства. В данный момент такой процесс наблюдается. В России запущены в действие новые нормативы по рубкам ухода в связи с введением интенсивной модели лесного хозяйства. Есть 6 пилотных регионов, в которых предложено арендаторам, лесопользователям вести такую деятельность. Но пока что законодательно есть такой момент, что арендатор вправе выбрать, ему вести традиционную модель или модель интенсивного лесного хозяйства. Ну вот и хотелось еще бы рассказать об одном проекте. Успешный опыт скандинавских стран в сфере ведения интенсивного лесного хозяйства нашел отражение в проекте Бофори, который реализуется при финансовой поддержке программы CBC Карелия с 2018 по 2022 годы. Это продвижение малого и среднего бизнеса в лесном секторе между Карелиями в России и Финляндии. Участники проекта, ведущий партнер данного проекта – это Институт природных ресурсов Финляндии. Также со стороны Финляндии принимают участие лесной центр Финляндии и профессиональный колледж Северной Карелии Риверия. Со стороны России в данном проекте принимают участие Петрозаводский государственный университет, Институт леса Карельского научного центра и арендатор, один из крупных арендаторов в Карелии, это ЗАП Кареллес. Целью проекта является расширение трансграничной предпринимательской деятельности в лесном секторе между Финляндией и Россией. И в рамках проекта изучается возможность и перспективы развития трансграничного сотрудничества в условиях ведения интенсивного лесного хозяйства. Также реализуются специально разработанные российско-финские образовательные программы для обучения работников лесного комплекса по обе стороны границы. Это как раз ключевой момент, что необходимо сделать для того, чтобы Россия смогла перестроиться на интенсивную модель, и, конечно же, обучить людей, работающих в лесу, как вести хозяйство для того, чтобы лесное хозяйство было устойчиво и леса использовались рационально. На первом этапе деятельности данного проекта был создан и вот уже начал функционировать в Петрозаводске трансграничный центр передовых лесных компетенций. В задачи такого центра как раз и входит разработка новых трансграничных программ повышения квалификации и переобучения лиц, занятых в лесном комплексе. И одна из задач – это создание и оснащение инновационных площадок для обучения, повышения квалификации и переподготовки специалистов лесного комплекса, который будет и создается сейчас на базе Петрозаводского государственного университета, колледжа Риверия и Института природных ресурсов Финляндии. Также в задачи центра входит публикация учебных и методических пособий. И один из множества результатов, которые преследует центр, это как раз повышение уровня знаний и навыков специалистов лесного комплекса. Это как основной результат. Ну и также такие попутные сопутствующие результаты – это и устранение барьеров при взаимодействии российских и финских компаний в сфере взаимодействия в лесном секторе, и активизация трансграничного российско-финляндского бизнеса в сфере лесного комплекса и в сфере биоэнергетики. На первом этапе деятельности центра было с помощью анкетирования проведен такое своеобразное исследование, где делался запрос у российских и финских лесопользователей, какими услугами они могли обмениваться в сфере ведения интенсивного лесного хозяйства и в каких тематических вопросах наиболее заинтересованы именно русские подрядчики для того, чтобы более успешно перестроиться на новую модель ведения лесного хозяйства. В рамках проекта финскими специалистами была подготовлена русскоязычная версия учебного пособия, которое было также недавно выпущено в Финляндии. авторы Тима Сакса, Яри Мина и Кари Уотила. Уход за молодняками, цели, технологии и затраты. Данное пособие было переведено на русский язык и также будет распространяться бесплатно для участников курсов на русской стороне. В ходе проекта также финскими и русскими экспертами готовится выпуск еще нескольких тематических публикаций по основным видам деятельности при ведении интенсивного лесного хозяйства. И на территории арендной базы Запкара-Лес, то есть этого крупного подрядчика в Карелии, а также в Финляндии, были подобраны лесные участки для проведения тренингов, мероприятий по основным видам деятельности, в данном случае и по рубкам ухода и другим практическим модулям курса. На данный момент в центре было проведено уже 6 курсов. Это 2 курса по проектированию и строительству лесных дорог, 2 курса по оценке качества лесоматериалов и по 1 курсу это лесная сертификация и уход за молодым лесом. Слушателями данных курсов уже на данный момент стали 98 человек из 4 регионов России. Также одно из направлений, которое реализуется в рамках проекта, это является составление тематических материалов для лесообеспечения с помощью беспилотных летательных аппаратов. Задачи данного блока следующие. Это проанализировать рынок беспилотных летательных технологий для получения информации о лесных территориях, именно таких лесных территориях, у которых плохая транспортная доступность. Составление тематических карт для нужд лесозаготовки на предприятиях, проведение анализа информационных потребностей на предприятиях, анализа именно структуры лесного фонда, ну и также инвентаризации лесов. Также в задачи данного блока реализации проекта входит испытание технологий в беспилотных летательных аппаратах в различных условиях местности и погоды и развитие методов обработки данных, полученных с помощью таких технологий. Этот блок вопроса курирует Институт природных ресурсов Финляндии. И я думаю, здесь тоже будут довольно-таки интересные результаты в конце проекта. Итак, какие же направления развития лесопользования сейчас необходимы в России? В связи с изменением климата лесное хозяйство России должно быть ориентировано на активное создание и поддержание высокопродуктивных хвойных древостоев, а лесная промышленность на активное использование лиственной древесины, которая сейчас, к сожалению, практически не используется. Такой подход будет не только экономически выгоден, но и будет способствовать связыванию углекислоты быстрорастущими насаждениями, что также как-то сдвинет или немножко замедлит темпы потепления климата, связанных с выбросом парниковых газов. Применение интенсивной модели лесного хозяйства требует, во-первых, своевременности и, во-вторых, высокого качества проведения лесохозяйственных мероприятий. Для России сейчас остро стоит необходимость повышения уровня квалификации работников лесного комплекса в сфере интенсивного лесовыращивания от этапа лесовосстановления до финальной рубки древостоев. И также для эффективного планирования лесохозяйственных мероприятий необходимо иметь актуальную информацию о состоянии лесного фонда. В этом большая перспектива есть у беспилотных технологий. И в заключение хотелось бы сделать небольшое лирическое отступление и привести одно из изречений русского классика Антона Павловича Чехова. Он уже в XIX веке думал о климатической проблематике, а также главное дает личный пример, как действовать, чтобы продлить комфортное существование жизни человечества на планете. Вот он пишет: когда я прохожу мимо лесов, которые я спас от порубки, или когда я слышу, как шумит мой молодой лес, посаженный моими руками, я осознаю, что климат немножко в моей власти, и что если через 1000 лет человек будет счастлив, то в этом буду немножко виноват и я. Thank you for your attention. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Alexei Pekoyev. It was very interesting to hear your presentation, especially to hear about the cross-border education activities that you engage in. And also the rest of your presentation was very interesting. So now we will try to bring back some of the presenters for today to have a conversation about possible elements for adaptation strategies for the Barents Forest sector and forest-dependent societies in the north. I do believe that we still have most of the presenters with us, except from Michael Mann, who unfortunately didn't have the possibility to participate. The time available for this part is somewhat limited, so I think I will start by directing some questions to some of you, but I encourage all of you who have presented to use the raise hand button and also comment on your own initiative if you like to. I think we could start a little bit about international cooperation. As a platform for further work in the working group on the Barents Forest sector, we are particularly interested in exploring ways and means of cooperation between our countries on challenges facing the forest resources in the region. And today we have heard about the report presented by Christina Nilsson, but it would be useful to hear also other speakers' reflections on possibilities for cooperation on the topics covered. In the project presented by Juha Aalto, international cooperation is mentioned as one of the important follow-ups. So I think I will first turn to you, Juha Aalto, to ask if it's possible to elaborate a little more on this issue. What are your reflections concerning possible cooperation between our countries with respect to forest fires or other topics that we have discussed here today?
Yeah, thanks. And of course, I look at this through my kind of fire lenses. So I think there are multiple kind of possibilities and important ways how collaborations could be kind of enhanced. And I think first of all, in my presentation there were quite many points already based on this, so on this recommendation. But first of all, just I think we should try to increase the amount of joint research, just understanding how fire regimes are changing in our area. And then just based on that, we could then already start developing better local adaptation strategies and for example, plan suppression actions. And in concrete ways, this joint research could be harmonizing fire statistics. So we have more or less comparable fire statistic, which kind of serve as the basis for then understanding the kind of the changes what are happening. And of course, kind of reflecting to the Alexei's presentation, he mentioned the use of UAV devices, and of course it would be very beneficial to kind of sharing different kind of best practices and possibilities, how for example new technologies can be used in different topics, also related into forest fires. So, and then I think one important thing here is that just kind of make sure that we maintain sufficient and operative rescue personnel and I think international collaboration is very important in that sense, that when we have this kind of large fire events, then we should have quite good and seamless kind of collaboration in suppression activities and coordinating these difficult situations. And I'm confident that the current status is quite good, but there's probably many ways that we can still improve in those conditions. And so those are my first reflections. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for those points, Juha Aalto. I think I turn to you now, Paul Krokene. Do you have any reflections on possible international cooperation on the subject that you or any of the others covered here?
Yeah, well, I mentioned this report. Well, I put it in the chat, at least one of the chats too. It's a European Forest Institute report that was written a couple of years ago by an international group about the spruce bark beetle problem in Europe, and it's in, well, right now, I mean, the problems span across borders, but there's very little formal international collaboration on managing bark beetle problems. So that was one recommendation for policymakers in that report, that we develop, or some take responsibility for developing like crisis management plans across countries. Like the border between Czech Republic and Germany, there's been a huge bark beetle outbreak. And so it's important that since the problem is sort of international, that also some of the management also becomes more international. And right now, I mean, different countries have their different ideas about how to manage the problem. And there's not really very much sort of best practice available. Nobody really knows. So there's a huge need for more collaboration.
Thank you. It's several possible follow-ups coming up here now. That's very good. Christina Nilsson, with your insights from this Barents Reserves project, is there anything you would like to add?
Well, one thing that I didn't mention is that, and it's aligns with this forest damage, the bark beetle, but it's not the bark beetle, it's resin top disease. We have a huge problem with that in the northern part of Sweden, together with grazing of moose and so on. And Scots pine, it's affecting Scots pine, young stands of Scots pine, and they tend to die. And through these discussions from the pilot study, contacts have been taken with Finland around this problem. So Swedish Forest Agency here in Sweden has started a forest damage network, and they have taken contacts with Finland to discuss this, because we understood that the problem is the same in northern Finland with this resin top disease. And as was said just now, we don't really have any good plan for how to manage these young Scots pine stands that are affected. So we need to learn more and to gather information, and of course have an exchange, a cross-border exchange around these questions. That's one example.
Thank you very much, Christina. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on the need for international cooperation on these topics? Mr. Vladimir Dmitriev, please.
Добрый день, коллеги. Ну, я хотел бы напомнить, что у нас есть специально созданная рабочая группа Сбер Барents региона по лесному сектору. И я думаю, было бы целесообразно бы ее всячески продвигать и всячески, ну, как бы развивать это международное сотрудничество, о чем мы говорим. Вот. И, кроме того, вот тема лесных пожаров, ну, как для нашей страны, так и, насколько я понимаю, для всех остальных участников данного мероприятия, они весьма и весьма актуальны, весьма и весьма, ну, перспективны. И я думаю, что это направление, безусловно, заслуживает внимания, было бы, ну, интересно, мы были бы, ну, крайне заинтересованы тоже принимать участие в тех проектах, в тех программах, вот, ну, отчасти о которых сейчас заявлялось. Вот. Ну и также я хотел бы сообщить, что вот 4 ноября в рамках работы конференции в Глазго по климату мы планируем провести также круглый стол по лесу, по лесному хозяйству, по влиянию лесного хозяйства, вернее, точнее, влиянию климата на лесное хозяйство. Вот, и я, ну, надеюсь, что вы тоже поддержите, вас это заинтересует, и вы сможете подключиться к этому мероприятию, ну, и там будет дискуссия, можно будет также обсудить вопросы и представить какие-то результаты климатических исследований в регионе Сбер. Поэтому я считаю, что, ну, в рамках рабочей группы по Сберу нам крайне важно, крайне необходимо сотрудничать.
Thank you very much, Vladimir Dmitriev, and I fully agree with you that we need a very active, we more and more need a very active forest working group in the Barents region. And we look forward to hear from the Finnish participants later on their plans for the future work. And I hope that you can provide us with some information on the roundtable discussion after the webinar into the group so that we can participate there. Thank you very much. I think now we turn to another topic.
Конечно, конечно, мы дадим такую информацию.
Thank you. Before we turn to another topic, maybe Alexei Pekoyev, do you have any comments on the international cooperation on these issues?
Ну, если позволите, если позволите небольшой комментарий. Так, меня слышно, перевод, да? Хорошо. Вот буквально мы сейчас столкнулись с тем, что, как я говорил, вот эта проблема, что арендаторы, к сожалению, не хотят переходить на модель интенсивного лесопользования. И в чем может быть здесь проблема? То, что, к сожалению, сейчас это заложено уже как бы в мировоззрении человека, то есть получить только от леса какую-то прибыль для себя, для своей компании, и не всегда задумываться о будущих поколениях и о том, насколько большую глобальную роль выполняют леса на планете. И поэтому, несмотря на то, что вот в рамках данного проекта был создан вот этот трансграничный центр передовых компетенций с целью обучения работников лесного сектора, то мне кажется, и наш как раз директор нашего института поддерживал такую идею, что мы должны немножко опускаться не с уровня работников лесного сектора, а начинать работу с уровня подрастающего поколения. То есть я знаю, что и в соседних странах, в Финляндии, в Норвегии, молодежь, она оторвана от природы, оторвана, старается жить в городах и часто не выбирает лесные профессии. И в этом плане, конечно, задача нас, может быть, как научного сообщества, коллектива, доносить уже подрастающему поколению о важной роли лесов. И поэтому вот в России еще буквально лет 70 назад был такой положительный, вот, на мой взгляд, опыт по созданию школьных лесничеств на местах, где при школе создавался своеобразный такой кружок, где дети непосредственно знакомились и с природой леса, принимали участие, вплоть до того, что участие в посадках леса. И, к сожалению, вот в данный момент эта деятельность очень на низком уровне. И в том плане, если попробовать скоординировать усилия и в скандинавских, например, зарубежных странах, и в России по созданию передовых таких методов, как донести подрастающему поколению, ну и в том числе вовлечь их в понимание важности лесных экосистем, для того, чтобы в будущем их мировоззрение уже было настроено на то, что все-таки лесу нужно восстановление, лесу нужен уход. Поэтому если подумать в рамках вот такого сотрудничества, то, мне кажется, вот перспектива, как повлиять на подрастающую молодежь, чтобы не были, как сказать, не сидели только в смартфонах и в интернет-среде, а именно старались максимально участвовать в окружающей их жизни, в том числе и посещать леса, проявлять заботу о лесах, ну и вот что-то подобное. То есть я думаю, это для многих соседних стран сейчас проблема актуальна. И тогда человек будет оставаться на лесных территориях, будет работать в лесу, будет ухаживать за лесом, и будет положительный, мне кажется, эффект. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Alexei Peguyev. Some very important points there, and I think this marks a good transition to the next topic that I was planning to discuss with you, which is education, training, and competence building. Now, climate change mitigation and adaptation might also influence the need for education, new skills, and training of actors in the sector in the future. Yesterday, we discussed how to involve the younger generation more and ways for cooperation. That's I would like now to just a minute. I missed en sida. Sorry, I had some notes for my plan for this discussion that were lost here. But we discussed yesterday how to involve the younger generation more actively in our sector. And during the past 2 years in our working group has cooperated with the Russian Federation on an international junior forest contest that they are arranging annually in Moscow. And this is one example of engaging younger people across borders in building knowledge and networks. There might be other good examples that we can build upon in our cooperation in the future. But may I ask you, Vladimir Dmitriev, if you could comment on the topic, and after that I open for comments from other speakers.
Ну, я считаю, что это действительно очень интересная тема. потому что, ну, как бы молодежь достаточно активно реагирует и на вопросы сохранения лесов, и на вопросы сохранения климата. И надо сказать, что у нас проходит, ну, несколько конкурсов, которые прежде всего ориентированы на молодежь. Это и конкурсы среди школьных лесничеств, о которых здесь уже упоминали, где дети представляют свои работы, представляют свои, ну, такие еще юные научные исследования, свои наблюдения за теми изменениями, которые происходят в тех лесах, ну, в ближайших лесах, которые расположены в тех местах, где они живут. Также у нас есть конкурс молодых ученых, ну, там тоже молодежь как бы, ну, довольно часто представляет свои исследовательские работы и там по биологии лесных видов, как меняется биология, и по динамике растительности и так далее. Ну и, конечно, вот у нас есть еще один такой конкурс, который называется Международный юниорский лесной конкурс, который в этом году у нас состоится. Ну, я надеюсь, что из ваших стран тоже будут представители на этом конкурсе, и мы сможем познакомиться с их работами. Но эта тема, она все более и более активно, ну, как бы звучит в этих работах, и мы это, в общем-то, можем наблюдать. Ну, второй момент, который очень важен, то есть, ну, понятно, что внимание, тяга детей к климатической тематике, она, ну, безусловно, очень важна, но не менее важно, чтобы она сопровождалась качественными методическими работами, которые несут педагоги. И современные, конечно, технологии образования, работы с детьми, они позволяют действительно достигнуть, ну, достаточно большого успеха с точки зрения привлечения внимания детей. Ну и в конечном счете многие, я думаю, что из вас также заинтересованы в том, чтобы, ну, дети смогли в конце концов выбрать свой жизненный путь и свою жизнь в дальнейшем связать с какими-то лесными, биологическими, ну или какими-то такими климатоориентированными профессиями, которые бы в дальнейшем позволили бы, ну, использовать их потенциал, использовать их такой, хоть и небольшой пока в юности, но все-таки какой-то жизненный опыт для того, чтобы заниматься и проблемами сохранения лесов, и проблемами управления лесами, и вопросами сохранения и предотвращения там тех климатических изменений, о которых мы сегодня много говорили. Ну, вот для нашей страны еще, что было интересно, и мы это вот, возвращаясь к тематике международного сотрудничества, нашли в рамках международного сотрудничества одну такую, на мой взгляд, очень хорошую тему, которая проходит в Евросоюзе. Это так называемая программа развития сельских территорий. Ну и в ряде стран мы видели, что она действительно реально работает, и работает на лесной сектор, то есть вот это вопросы развития инфраструктуры, развития там каких-то решений каких-то социальных вопросов для жителей сельской местности, они очень важны, особенно важны для молодежи, потому что, ну, как бы молодежь должна, в общем-то, испытывать не только лишения и тяготы, как бы, которые связаны, тем не менее, с жизнью в сельской местности, но и, в общем-то, иметь возможность, как бы, каким-то образом получать те блага цивилизации, которые существуют. Ну, я, собственно говоря, призываю всех, давайте подумаем, каким образом мы могли бы обмениваться и вот этими программами по работе с молодежью, и помочь молодежи с этими молодежными обменами, потому что вот эти вот международные молодежные конференции, вот, ну, нам удалось несколько раз быть в шведском университете, и мы, да, сельскохозяйственном университете, и мы с очень большим удовольствием там общались с молодежными вот этими коллективами из разных стран, когда они там собирались по разным группам, когда они пытались там решать различные задачи, которые им набрасывали организаторы. И я считаю, что это очень важно и полезно. И они действительно очень искренне считали, ну, потом делились с нами своими впечатлениями, как для них это было интересно и как они это ценят. И в дальнейшем видят, что многое из того, что они получили, они могут использовать в своей жизни. Ну, на этом я хотел бы остановиться. Большое спасибо. Если чем-то я помог вам вести это мероприятие, то я очень рад.
Thank you very much again, and for sharing your thoughts on this, Vladimir Dmitriev. I can't see any raised hands among the panelists now, but I may maybe challenge you once more, Alexei Pekoyev, if I may. You mentioned that you pointed at the need for strengthening education and qualifications in your presentation. Do you have anything to add or anything you would like to highlight on this point?
Ну, в принципе, все, что я хотел сказать, я выразил в мысли, поэтому, наверное, дополнений уже нет.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Kristina Nilsson? Do you have anything you would like to share with us on education and skills? Kristina, did you not hear me?
No, I didn't hear you until
No,
now.
it's okay. I
Sorry.
asked if you have anything, any thoughts about the need for cooperation on building skills and competence for the future that you'd like to share.
Well, I can share with you one example in a small scale level, a project that we have had here in a small village called Rusksele, local schools in Biosphere Reserve. And in that small project, school children learned more about their own home village and the environment around the village, and a little about history and cultural heritage. And they tried fishing, and they tried growing potatoes. Well, you can hear it was very small scale and with quite young children. But the aim of that project was to give the children more knowledge about their own close to home environment. And by that, they hopefully will be adults with more care for the environment. And also, if you if you know more about your home village and you like to live there, you liked to live there when you were a small child, the hope is that you will be more likely to return when you have had your education, and you can come back with your new skills and do a good job in your own town when you have grown up. So that's an example of education in a small scale. I also think that we can be better with working with universities and students, and invite them to the work that has to be done. Students have to write reports about different topics. We could give them important topics to write about, and we could continue to invite students to our conferences, and they can participate in different ways. I think that's a good way forward. It's not new, but we have to increase those efforts, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristina. A very good example there, and and an exchange of these kind of good practices and examples, I think would be beneficial for all of us. Paul Krokene, we still have a little time left for a comment from you, please.
It's just a small example of involving children in, or maybe teaching small children aged like 10 to 15 about scientific publications and scientific method. A few years ago, I published in it's a journal called Frontiers for Young Minds. It's like a spin-off for kids from Frontiers journal series. So it's like a serious scientific publisher, but they also have this one where the kids are the reviewers. So you submit like a very simple, obviously, version of a scientific paper, and then they decide whether it's interesting or not. And then you get written feedback from a 12-year-old telling you that we thought the introduction was a little bit boring, and you could explain this better, and what is this difficult word, etc. And I thought it was a really nice, and it's also a nice resource, but it's all in English, of course. So, but it's a really nice resource on everything from how the brain functions and COVID-19 and bark beetles. So hundreds of different papers, but also the process of involving the kids. So it could also be a school project, I think. But since it's in English, it might be a bit challenging for maybe for well, kids like in our countries that have English as a second language or third. So, but I just mentioned, check out that journal because it's really a nice initiative, I think.
Thank you very much. If you have any link that you could put in the
Yep.
chat, so it would be very nice. I think I give the word now to Juha Aalto as the last one in this part. Please, Juha.
Yes, thank you. I don't have any concrete examples. I just want to highlight what our kind of project shows, that in terms of forest fires, the preventive measures are in central. So this means that we definitely need more community education. So we need to increase people awareness of forest fire and forest fire risk. And of course, it doesn't deal just young people, but also like other general public, and also actors in forest sector and especially in rescue services. So because it is projected that these kind of large fires will become more frequent, so we have to make sure that also different sectors are prepared for those events. So this is in brief. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Important point there. We will now continue to the next part of our program, which is the transition of the chairmanship of the working group on the Barents Forest sector from Norway to Finland. This event marks the ending of the Norwegian chairmanship of the working group. And after the ministerial conference that will be held on the 26th of October, Finland will share the Barents Euro-Arctic Council and thereby also this working group. Now we will learn more about the priorities of the upcoming Finnish chairmanship of the group. And Finland will probably experience less disturbances by the pandemic and provide opportunities to meet in person. We really look forward to that. Sanna Panukoski from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Finland will be the new chair of the working group. And Sanna, it's a pleasure to invite you to indicate what we can expect for the next 2 years. Please, Sanna.
Thank you, Anne, and good afternoon, everybody. I will start with sharing my presentation. Let's see. How it goes. Yes, now it should be seen. Yes, like Anne told you, my name is Sanna Panukoski and I work at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, Finland. And yes, during this October, the chairmanship of the working group on Barents Forest sector, and of course the whole chairmanship of the Barents Euro-Arctic Council will transfer from Norway to Finland. And I will tell you briefly about the priorities for the chairmanship of Finland during the coming 2 years. But first, before that, I would like to thank and congratulate Norway. It has been very interesting 2 days, and we have heard many excellent presentations and interesting discussions on the topical issues of forestry, bioeconomy, and climate change. So thank you for organizing us this great event. And also I would like to thank Ms. Anne Delfin and Mr. Knut Øystad for your work as chairing and leading us through the Norwegian chairmanship in the Barents Forest Sector Working Group. You did not have a very easy job since the pandemic started just right before we were going to meet actually during your chairmanship, but I think you managed very well, and we have had many good online meetings during the last 2 years. So thank you for you. But then if we go to Finland, you are actually the first ones to have a sneak peek of how our presidency looks outwards. We have an Arctic fox as our so-called mascot, and the slogan of the Finnish presidency for the Barents Euro-Arctic Council is that we believe that the Barents region is the region of opportunities. And I'm sure we can all agree on this. If we talk about the basic starting points for Finland's presidency activities in the Barents Euro-Arctic Council, they will be Agenda 2030, the European Green Deal, and the Barents Programme 2019-2023. We will focus on the areas of sustainable development and healthy environment, people-to-people contact, and transport and logistics. And of course, there are many other topics covered during our presidency, but these are kind of the main focus areas. To achieve sustainable development, we must ensure that the future of the Barents region is built on economic, environmental, social, and cultural sustainability, and of course on carbon neutrality. And I would like to also highlight that, like Sweden and Norway before us, in the people-to-people contacts, the special focus will be on the young people. They hold the key to the future on the Barents region to maintain it lively and fostering, like we have heard, especially yesterday during the discussions. The year 2023 marks the 30th anniversary of the Barents Cooperation, and there is an intention to celebrate it in the highest political level, subject to the circumstances. Our working group, the working group on Barents Forest Sector, it was established in 2000, so we have not reached 30 years yet, but I think 20 plus years is also a very good achievement, and perhaps we will celebrate it also somehow, we will see. So if we talk about the priorities of our working group, we will focus on the sustainable forest-based bioeconomy in the Barents region. Forest-based new products are expected to replace non-renewables, and new nature-based services are being created. And this will help us to identify potential challenges relating to the transition to a low-carbon society while maintaining healthy ecosystems. The Finnish presidency will also seek to engage with relevant organizations in the forestry sector in the Barents region, and also with other Barents working groups. And then the main events of our working group, well, if the pandemic situation allows, we are trying to arrange all the meetings in the Barents region of Finland. So we are going to meet in Joensuu, in Kajaani, Kuusamo, and finally in Rovaniemi. So like you were hoping in the last discussions, we will try to keep the working group active, and we will try to do our best in that. Our main event will be Barents Forest Forum 2023 in Rovaniemi, and there we will discuss sustainable development, but you will receive more detailed information on that event later. But I really hope to see you all face to face, first of all, of course, in our working group meetings, but in Rovaniemi after 2 years. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sanna. I'm very certain that the chairmanship of the working group will be in the very best hands for the 2 years to come. From the Norwegian side, we really look forward to continue the cooperation in the group, and especially look forward to be able to meet physically again. Now, this webinar is coming towards the end, and I will try to sum up some key lessons that I find that this day has provided us with. Climate change and natural disturbances could bring many of our forests to a tipping point where they can no longer provide the ecosystem services that we demand from them. The development in the Barents region is particularly challenging since the average temperature in the Arctic has increased faster than the average temperature on the rest of the planet. Today's topic is huge and complex. Nevertheless, we felt strongly that we should focus on climate change, forest disturbances, and adaptation during the Barents Forest Forum 2021. We basically think that these issues will occupy our attentions for decades to come, and should be a priority in the international cooperation in the Barents Forest, on forests in the Barents region and elsewhere for the future. We need to increase the resilience of forests on possible climate change scenarios through changes in forest composition and structure. These includes integrated forest management to foster biodiversity, increased tree species diversity and genetic diversity, to increase the resistance and promote structural diverse forests. The situation requires that we improve forest fire safety, both on their occurrence and on their spread. And not to forget fire prevention. We also need to improve measures aimed to increasing the capacity of forest ecosystems to absorb carbon. We need to improve monitoring and scientific support for key forest management activities in the region to detect development and enhance the early action. And we need to improve the regulatory framework for forest management and protection to establish adaptation measures effectively. We need to develop forest training programs that better incorporate the understanding of the influence of climate on forest conditions and dynamics. The challenges are immense, and we can only solve this together. The Barents Cooperation can only provide a modest contribution, but in this, all actions count. The Barents Cooperation can provide an arena for information exchange, knowledge sharing, and cooperation in our efforts to secure resilient forests in the region. And again, if we strive for a sustainable future, the forests are key. With this, it's time to close today's webinar. On behalf of the Norwegian chairmanship, I would like to thank you all for your participation these 2 days, and especially give our sincere thanks to the experts and speakers for your valuable contributions. I think we have heard some really interesting introductions, and we look forward to continue the cooperation on forests in the Barents region, which I believe we all find of great importance. So thank you all, and see you soon again.